BREAM. Duncan Charman's appeared regularly in Drennan Cup nominations, so who better to give you some bankside advice? We caught up with him during a session he spent at the beautiful YATELEY complex in Hampshire.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Arrived here last night with the hope of catching a few tench. Unfortunately, nothing happened last night to my rods, but my friend Steve, who joined me fishing up the bank, managed a couple of fish. He had a nice bream, might go £10, and a tench, a male, about £5. Conditions are perfect at the moment, so it's looking good. Fingers crossed we might get a little bit of action in the next hour or two. The rig I'm actually using today is a helicopter rig. It's a self-hooking system. What it is, we've got a very short, fine fluorocarbon hook link, about 3 inches. I've popped this up off the bottom. I found that popped up maggot works much better than maggots in the bottom that bury in the ground. When an actual tench comes in, blowing and sucking around, looking for some maggots in the silt and the debris on the bottom, these are sitting there right in front of its face. It sucks them in, lifts up, and the actual hook actually just embeds in the bottom lip. You need to have a reel that actually has a bait running facility, because obviously if you haven't and a fish bolts off with your bait in its mouth, it will actually take your hook link and snap the hook link, which is not what you want. I'm using actually maggots, mainly white maggots. I find white maggots are very good in the winter or the spring, and a few reds thrown in for good measure. The little edge is just to dip the feeder into some fish meal ground bait. It might seem extremely small, but that is full of fish meals, and as that goes through and you cast out, it falls down into your swim. Loads of small particles of fish meal come off. I feel that it does actually give me a little edge. We got here at 5 o'clock yesterday evening, and the first job to do is to actually get one of the marker rods out and have a little lead around, find out what features we've got out in front of us. After a couple of casts, I actually found a small gravel finger bar coming off a dead tree here, sunken tree at about 25 yards. Gravel is a cold place in the winter, so the last place I wanted to put my bait was on top of the gravel. What I wanted to do was actually drop it either side where the gravel meets the silt. It's like a corridor of a larder of food for the fish, and they actually patrol up and down the bottom of the gravel. Deposited about 1.5 pints of maggots, the same of hemp out, very accurately next to the marker float, and hopefully the food that we've actually put out will create a few feeding fish sometime in the next few hours, and we'll get a result. Well, things just weren't happening on the split lake, so I finally moved on to one of the smaller lakes on the complex, the pump house. A lot of people are afraid to move, but don't actually be afraid to move. The methods I'm using are going to be exactly the same. I'm going to spod some maggot and some hemp out, not too much, and we're going to actually fish for one fish at a time here, and hopefully, yeah, a bream or two will turn up today. Something's going to happen soon. Well, things have got a little bit desperate now, so plan C comes out of the actual bag. What I've done is, because the maggot rod hasn't been working, I've decided to go onto the method. Steve had a bream and a tench on a method ball last night, so I've got two Tutti Frutti boilies. I'm going to put this out where I put some bait earlier, some hemp and some maggot, because there's, well, actually just past, there's quite a big patch of bubbles, so I'm going to try and hit that, because that's obviously a fish. Out it goes, just a little bit further, but there's definitely fish bubbling out there. fill that down. At last, at long last, something's actually happened. Feels like a bream. I was half expecting the maggot to work better than the actual small Tutti Frutti boilie, but Tutis, they never let you down. This is a better bream. It's a good bream actually for this lake. Might even go bigger than 9.9 actually, Steve. And in she goes. Not the biggest spectacular fight I've ever had, but the weight's paid off. It's a good bream for this water. There we go. Let's pick her up. Lovely fish. Well worth the wait.
There's no doubt that is a proper bream, But you couldn't have picked a worse day to fish for bream than that.
No, you've just got to look at the conditions and you think it's going to be a grueler, don't you?
Flat, calm, not a cloud. Well, that white cloud, I think that's worse than sun. That white. Oh, and you just, I thought, oh, he might struggle. Luckily, he pulled one out of the bag.
He's a good angler.
He is a good angler.
He's pulled one out of the bag.
He is a good angler, and he's what I like about. Well, I've only read about him. I've not personally met him yet, but he seems to be a thinking angler.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, you fish with him,
Well,
don't
that's
you?
right. I fish quite a bit with Duncan, and a lot of the time he's a thinking angler, and we have totally different approaches to it because he's coming more from a match background.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and I'm sort of coming from a carpy background.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting just to go and, well, both get very competitive as well. So to sit next to each other and try and outfish one another, but it brings the best out in both of us. It's real good fun.
I'll tell you one thing we've learnt about match fishing with big bream. They definitely like what the carp are eating, but we reckon that they wait until the boilies have started to decompose. So what we do is to mix some of the most popular boilie mix at the venue in our ground bait.
Right.
And use that, and there is no doubt in my mind that while the method feed is great for carp, it is unbeatable for bream.
It's unbelievable. The only difference I make when I'm fishing it for bream rather than carp is I use a much longer hook.
Yes.
Don't know quite why, but for some reason, go 12 inches, 15 inches, you catch a lot more bream.
It gives them that time to turn before it hooks them up. Great stuff. There's more to come from Paul after the break when he'll be giving some advice of his own and showing us a few